Can I take this off? Hey, guys. Morning, everybody. So, thank you all for coming. I got to tell you, I'm really, really excited that you all are in this building right now, that we're together in this conference room. Feels much more like we're getting towards a point of normalcy where we can all be together here at home in New Orleans, where we were really, really looking forward to getting back to. Obviously, we were displaced a little longer than we wanted to be for informals, and we'll get to some of that. But first, I'd like to say that I think, like all of you, this organization, from ownership to the players, our front office and coaching staff, share the sadness for what we've lost as a state and as a city. And we also, I think, have incredible optimism and hope for what we're going to be able to do in rebuilding. I think the galvanizing power of adversity is enormous. And I think this city has reflected that over and over again. And I think this city and this state are going to reflect it now, and we want our team to reflect the same ability to overcome adversity. You know, since we hired Willie and when we were going through the process with Willie, we've talked a lot about our ability to do that as a group, to engender that kind of buy-in as a group. And we've seen that. We've seen that with Willie and his staff. Going back to Summer League, we've seen that. Going all the way through the period of time of the hurricane, we saw what Willie was able to do in terms of galvanizing his staff and our players to get directly involved. And, you know, it's an honor to work for an owner like Mrs. Benson, who's been there for everybody in need from the very beginning. Having people like Greg Bensel with us, who's here in the back, who helped us work directly with legislators in almost every parish to try to find the most urgent needs and for our players to get involved most directly where it mattered most. And we have a group of guys that care very deeply, but they don't care very deeply about grandstanding. And I think, unfortunately, when something like this happens, the loudest people are often the people that have the most to gain by looking like they care. This is our home. These are our people. And this is what we're going to do for the rest of our time here. We're going to be very, very intimately involved. And I think the thing that excites me the most is I know beyond a shadow of a doubt we have the character of players, the character of coaches, and the front office. Our basketball staff, our business staff, they're the right people for this moment. They're the right people for this city and this state. And most importantly, our team. These are the right guys to achieve something really special. So we feel a great deal of optimism, quite frankly. I talked about the hiring of Willie and when we got to Summer League, what we saw from him. You know, our offseason really started when Brandon Ingram brought everybody together in Phoenix. His leadership has been essential all offseason. His dedication and work ethic all throughout the offseason has been essential for us. When you see him walk in here today, many of you haven't been around him in person for 18 months. This is a different kid. This is a different physical presence from Brandon. And I need to stop calling these young men kids, but when you're 50-something, that's what you do. I think his leadership started the process for us, and Willie helped us build on that in Summer League, and I think you saw a great deal of that. And our players were really excited about it. And that continued in Nashville, where we had pretty much everybody come together. There's been some discussion and some social media shaming of the people that weren't there. I assure you everybody that wasn't there was still very engaged with us on every level. Unfortunately, one of the players that was not there was Zion Williamson. I want to share with you all, we met yesterday as a group, Willie, myself, Trajan, Aaron Nelson representing the medical team, Zion and his family, and we established a timeline for his return to play. Zion is returning from a foot surgery suffered at the beginning of the summer. No, the beginning of summer isn't exactly accurate, but earlier in the off season prior to Summer League, he had a fractured right foot that was repaired surgically. His timeline should get him back on the court in time for regular season. That would be our hope and our view, and we're very optimistic about what that looks like. Unfortunately, I know that's going to be taken as a very big negative for all of you. It's really not for us because we were dealing with it all off season. And we feel very confident about where things are and very happy with the improvements there. So as we start to head into this training camp, we're doing it with an unbelievable amount of optimism, and in large part it's because of what we experienced in Nashville. Coach Green and I were able to speak to a group of season ticket holders at one point while we were in Nashville and discuss what the team looks like. I've never seen a group of guys put more sweat on the floor than these guys did in Nashville. The diving for loose balls, the defensive intensity, et cetera, is different. It very much a carryover from what you saw from our group in Summer League. You know, they were undefeated not because we were outscoring people, but because we were guarding everybody. And every member of our team that was there in Nashville, and it was the vast majority of them, is sharing that ethos and that approach to the game. And that's really, really exciting to see, because we're going to go as far as we're able to take each other. We're going to go as far as our results actually dictate we do, not what people say about what we're capable of. And I think our guys are bought into that. And Coach has really instilled an overachieving attitude in our group. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have. Thanks, Will. So he was working out on his own on the court. He was, and frankly, was doing an unbelievable job. It's crazy sometimes when you look your best what happens. But he was working out prior to Summer League, and he suffered the injury at that point on the court while playing. And our doctor, Dr. Montgomery, was part of the surgical process. We've had a strength and conditioning coach, Stan Williams, our head strength and conditioning coach, with him throughout the summer. His rehab's been done totally in lockstep with the organization, and we're really happy with where it's at.
As you know, there's been a lot of reporting locally and nationally about Zion's relationship with you and the organization. Can you clarify, from your perspective, how is that relationship between you and the organization and him and his inner circle, and how has it evolved from the time you drafted him until now?
So as I told you, we were all together yesterday. And I think it's safe to say that the noise around Zion has been greater and more deafening than almost any player I've ever been around. He's such a polarizing figure. People really enjoy hyperbole about him, in large part because his gifts are so profound. You almost don't know what to say. I think the one thing I've noticed in 28 years now in the NBA, the facts are always distorted to glorify the winners and to vilify the losers. Nothing's really ever what is written or said. People get credit they don't deserve when you win. When you win a championship, people get credit for things they don't deserve. And when you lose, everybody gets blamed that isn't really fair either. And the stories have to become more sensational. In the case of Zion, what I think is really interesting is the night of the lottery, I was together with Z and his family. And the story broke that he wanted to go back to Duke, and he didn't want to be, you know it, you're laughing. He wanted to go back to Duke. He didn't want to be in New Orleans. Well, that was news to everybody in that room at that moment. So this kind of thing happens. Z and I spoke yesterday and actually enjoyed a pretty good laugh, both about the fact that our relationship's terrible, but the image of me trying to play piano for Zion was almost laughable because I don't actually play piano. So he took a great deal of joy in that thought. But look, it happens, and there's going to be negativity around us until we win. And I would say that about the time we start to be more successful, this is true league-wide and it's true in all the sports. About the time we're more successful, you're going to be able to hear about some ridiculous story about how close we are and how we sing Kumbaya. And when we lose, there's going to be way more stories about how ridiculous I am and that our relationship doesn't work. And that's just the nature of the business, and you can't worry about it. And we're certainly not going to waste any time wallowing in the past. I think this is really well positioned to move in a good way. And I would encourage you to talk to Z. They were very, very unhappy with the way the relationship was characterized, and I'm sure they'll speak to that.
Hey, can you just speak to more of going through the IDA process and having to relocate, and any of the players or coaches suffer damage or anything like that, and what was it like having to move everything to Nashville for informals?
Yeah, so first of all, I should have said this earlier. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Coach Casey Alexander at Belmont and Coach Stackhouse and his staff at Vanderbilt. They opened their doors to us. They absolutely moved heaven and earth to make it possible for us to work out at the times we needed to use their weight rooms when we needed to. Their willingness to host us as they did really came at a very urgent time of need for us. As you know, typically coming right out of Labor Day, all of your players tend to return and you have informal workouts in your own building. And it would have been a real setback for us in terms of building chemistry and camaraderie were we not able to do that. And I think many times, and again, I spoke to it already, the galvanizing power of adversity, those 2 weeks in Nashville are going to pay enormous dividends for us. The energy that was on that court, and again, I told you how happy I am. You guys are all here to get to see it. You're going to be on the practice court. You haven't been there in, 18 months? You're going to get to feel the energy of this group. What Coach Green has going on was palpable in Nashville. And I really believe that doesn't happen if we didn't have to relocate. I don't think the spirit that we had and our belief and desire to be with one another is as strong as if we hadn't had to relocate. In terms of damage, Andrew, nobody suffered any damage that was terribly profound. We had some staffers company-wide that did have some issues, and as she always does, Mrs. Benson stepped up and took care of people, and that will, I know, continue to happen. But we're really blessed, and we were truly blessed as a group to come through it very well. And again, that's one of the reasons that we're so completely committed to. We're going to be on the ground in the places hit the hardest. We'll be in Lafourche. We'll be in St. Bernard. We were in Barataria. We're going to be there because it matters.
And I'm sorry to continue with the Zion hyperbole, but like you said, there's been a lot of change the past few years with him here. You talked about the discussions about, the personal relationship with you two guys. Just how have those discussions gone as far as his view on the direction of the franchise and where things are going towards the future?
Well, again, this goes back to a lot of the questions that were asked. You make a coaching change. Did you talk to him? Did you get his input in that? Well, when you can watch how people react to a group of people, you kind of know what you need to know. Zion's been really, really direct about the things that he cared the most about. We spoke to him prior to free agency, and as we did Brandon, and we talked about the things we needed to do as a team. When we left the previous season and we had our exit meetings, we talked very directly about what the team needed. With every player that was on the team, we asked, what do you think we need most? And so I think our decision-making in the offseason was very much informed by all of our players, and Zion was certainly among that group. And I think he shares our optimism about the pieces we've added. I think you'll notice that there's a theme with what we've done. These are guys that are going to lay it on the line on both sides of the court. These are guys that have a very real connection to one another. And I think Z would share that sentiment as well.
Two questions, if I could. Will Zion's return resemble 2 years ago with the bursts and things like that? And then second, and I think I already kind of know the answer, is there more pressure this year, given you've had multiple head coaches and given that Zion is entering year 3 and given that you've had time to maybe develop the program a little bit?
So I'll take those, I guess, in stages. I think the question is there more pressure now? No, there's no difference. Our job is to win, and it's always been to win. There was never a time where we said, hey, we're on easy street, we're going to fake it for 2 years until people care about whether or not we win. We've wanted to win from the beginning, and that takes time, and putting the right group of players together takes time. So no, there's no greater urgency or false timeline on this than there is anything else. What has always been true is that we're trying to find the right mix and the right fit, and we believe very, very strongly that we found that in Coach Green and his staff. Trajan Langdon, Swin, Bryson, our entire front office staff. We've gone well out of our way to identify the pieces that didn't fit on the court and off, and we feel very comfortable that we're moving in the right direction. But in terms of pressure, I don't think it's fair to say there's a difference in that. we've wanted to do this right and be correct from the very beginning and to build a family-like atmosphere. I don't apologize for that. We're going to continue to do that. And when it starts to yield the kind of results we want, everyone's going to act like we were genius for doing so, and it's just the nature of the beast.
Griffin, just going back to Zion's injury, is there any more details you could give on the type of injury or what bone it was in the foot that he broke? And
So it's his right foot. It's his 5th metacarpal.
I know you said you expect him to be back for the regular season. Do you expect him to be able to play in preseason, or is that going to be kind of judged
Based
by
on
how
our
it's-
timeline yesterday, I wouldn't say that that's terribly likely. We're going to just treat the entire preseason like training camp for the whole team. He'll be no different in that way. But I would anticipate we're ramping up throughout preseason.
There was a disturbing incident in the offseason involving Jackson Hayes. Can you give us any update on that? Have you spoken at length to him about that? Obviously, his feelings about what happened and what the police's feelings about what happened are completely different. Can you shed any light on that?
Yes and no. So I can shed light on the fact that we've spoken. We've spoken about the impact it's had on Jackson. I think the totality of what took place has been very positive for him. It's given him a level of focus that he's actually grateful for. He views the situation as a blessing, and I believe when you ask him that, he'll tell you the same thing. He was an absolute monster for us in Nashville. The improvements in his game and the strides he's made both as a person and as a player are really profound. And I think he would probably attribute some of that to the lessons he learned over this summer. But I also think there was a great deal, a great deal written and said about the situation that was not true. And as that continues to work its way through the legal system, I think you'll see that.
Hey, David, when you evaluate this season, how are you going to define what a successful season was for this team? What would you consider success?
Winning. Look, as I said before, we never came into this thinking that we didn't want to win. We're trying to build a team that understands how to win in a sustainable way, that understands key moments in games and recognizes those moments and seizes them. And this team was really young when we put it together. It continues to be fairly young, but I think we've got young veterans now. They're learning how to win. The setbacks that they had as a group last year, the ones that are returning, it meant a great deal to them. The players that are new to us recognized where they could help and where they could step in and make a difference. And I think you're going to see that players like Devontae Graham have a really profoundly positive impact on our group, because at the end of games, Devontae knows exactly what he's going to do to go get a shot. And the versatility that our roster has, what Trajan and Bryson were able to do in the draft by way of example, what we were able to do in free agency, what we were able to do through trade. We've got a roster now that's a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. It takes a while to get there, but we're excited about what we have. We feel like there's a depth to this team that we hadn't had before. So I would tell you that certainly from a character perspective, this is the best group we've had. And I think we're pretty optimistic that we should be able to compete at a pretty high level. But most importantly, we can do so from a template where we can continue to build in a sustainable way. And I know people get tired of hearing that. But what happens quite often when you're a young team struggling is you try to do it all at one time, and then you set yourself back even further. What we've done is try to grow in a mindful, sustainable way. Phoenix missed the playoffs 10 years in a row before they went to the finals. Coach was part of that finals run. That wasn't a team that got seasoned in the playoffs and then made the finals. You can start to achieve at a really high level once you get the right mix around. Sacramento's missed the playoffs 15 straight years. They're not trying to do that. Winning in the Western Conference is really, really difficult, and it takes time. And we're happy with where we've gotten to this point, but certainly understand everybody's frustration that it hasn't happened faster as well.
Yeah, Griff, do you have an update on the vaccine status for the roster and the staff, and just kind of what type of progress you guys are making on that front?
So unlike football, I don't think I'm supposed to get into the vaccine status, but I think there's a likelihood that we're probably down to just one player who's not vaccinated, maybe two, but the entire staff is vaccinated, everyone that will be in the building. You all have to be vaccinated to be there. So the league's done a really, really good job of making it almost unanimous that everybody is fully vaccinated. And I would say by the time the regular season rolls around, I would bet we end up at that point.
Okay, we're going to go to Zoom now. Scott Kushner, you have a question?
Yeah, Griff, I know last season the Reigns were handed a little bit, away from Drew Holiday to Brandon and Zion. Even more so, it seems like the way you guys approach this offseason, that this is kind of their team. What do you hope to see from them? What kind of expectation, I guess, do you have for them as a pairing, a unit, and you speak a little bit more of what Brandon's going to have to do, without Zion here for at least the first couple of weeks?
Yeah, so I think a great deal's been made over their time together that Brandon was more productive at times without Zion. Last year, we saw their time together on the floor sort of explode in a positive way in terms of their efficiency. They're learning how to win together and how to utilize their gifts together in a way that's exciting. Most importantly, Coach Green and his staff have incredible thoughts on how we do that and how we lean into the two of them working together. So we feel very optimistic that we're going to be able to get the most out of both of them together. I think that in terms, Scott, of what you asked, in terms of what we expect from a leadership standpoint, we expect more of exactly what we've seen from Brandon. Brandon reached out to us and wanted us to get everyone to him to work out in Phoenix. And he did that. And he led those workouts. And when you see him, as I said, you're going to recognize a different player physically. And that's because he put in all of the time he possibly could. He's walking the walk. And I think that's something that's really, really common with this group. And I would say that's going to be a pretty familiar refrain with Coach Green. This team's going to walk the walk. And probably to my detriment, or rather, it's been my fault. I think we haven't been able to live up to what we were trying to achieve in terms of representing the ethos of this city. Our fans deserve us to play a certain way and at a certain level, and I think our players understand that, and they're bought in on doing that.
Chris Dotson?
Yeah, hey Griff, thanks for having us on this morning. Two questions. One about the players' maturity levels off the court, especially during hurricane relief. I've seen Trey Murphy step up, a few other players step up to do things like that off the court. Can you talk about how going through that adversity will help them mature as players on the court, as young veterans? And then looking at roster construction, can you talk about Josh Hart's contract, how it come together, and how he texted you when he was first traded here about wanting to be here. Can you talk about players that want to be here and how y'all will get creative to keep them here?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the question. Relative to Josh Hart's deal came together in a way that I think was really representative of the types of relationships we have with players and the agencies. That was done very much in conjunction with Josh and his agent, Aaron Mintz. Trajan and I spent a great deal of time with both. And where we ended up is a place that I think rewards Josh for what he's capable of, the contributions he's made, his incredible desire to win and competitiveness, and also give him a little bit of flexibility to perhaps sign a longer deal to stay with us in the future. But it was really about finding a middle ground in terms of how do we continue to build in a sustainable way and at the same time honor the commitment he's made to us. And so that's what we try to do. I think when you talk to Josh, he'll tell you the same. I think in terms of the maturity of our group and what Trey Murphy's done, Devontae Graham's done, Brandon Ingram has done, and has done throughout his time here with no fanfare. So Brandon Ingram and Lonzo was this same person, I'd like to point out. They did a great deal in the community that they weren't out there trying to get credit for. Their teams, their off-the-court teams, their shoe companies, they were really committed to making a really big impact from the time they got here. Brandon and Josh are among them. Josh has continued to do things. You know, he's way more educated than I am in the social media space. He does things I don't really understand with auctioning off NFTs by way of example. But this is a guy who's getting involved in the community in a social way. Brandon's been an on-the-ground guy from the beginning, just never really wanted any credit for it. So it's sort of what Trey did and our younger players do sort of dovetail with what has been happening here already. It's a pretty common theme here for people to want to be part of this community.
And last question from David Grubb.
Yeah, David, I appreciate the question. As I said before, and we're not going to wallow a lot in the negativity, but I would tell you that, again, I don't think anybody in our building questions the direction we're trying to take this team in, and everybody's committed to doing that. And I think we certainly have underachieved in terms of our results, and at the same time, I think we may have overachieved in terms of the character we've assembled with this group. And I have a very long, career in this business that you can look at, and we've had a great deal of success every step along the way. And I don't see there's any reason for anybody to believe that's going to change. And at the same time, it's not going to matter. If all of the articles that were written said that I was basically the second coming of Red Auerbach, and we lost, it's irrelevant. So I don't really care what the narrative is. I care what our results are. And David, I appreciate what you're asking, and at the same time, I would tell you it's pretty irrelevant. You're gonna experience criticism in the business, and until we win, I'm gonna continue to receive that, and that's just how it goes. That's the nature of the business. Thank you, guys.
Recording